Good morning, everyone. 8:15. We talked a lot this morning on Morning Blend from 5 to 7 a.m. about how we would be talking about the controversial tweets that President Trump tweeted this morning around 6:15. We were in the newscast. We were talking about all of the healthcare drama that's happening, how they haven't come to a decision, and then all of a sudden we were hit with these new tweets about something completely unrelated. So I'm going to go straight to the tweets because they speak for themselves. He writes, after consultation with my generals and military experts, please be advised that the United States government will not accept or allow transgender individuals to serve in any capacity in the United States military. Our military must be focused on decisive and overwhelming victory and cannot be burdened with the tremendous medical costs and disruption that transgender in the military would entail. Thank you. So obviously when that went out, thousands upon thousands of retweets. Some were liking it. A ton were commenting saying, what is going on, to even use that word, that the transgender burden the military community. I think it was the tone that really struck a lot of people. But let us know right now in the comments below, how do you feel about this? Do you know anyone who serves in the military currently, like Dina does, who's an advocate, not only an advocate, but who is a transgender male?
Right.
So do you want to talk about that experience?
Sure. Yeah, we can do that now. So I have a friend who's transgender, the first openly transgender man in the military. He is currently with the Nevada National Guard, and he recently came out and he was open about being transgender. The people above him in his squadron and also within the Nevada National Guard were very supportive of this. And even Senator Catherine Cortez Masto, who is a Democratic senator, of course, at the Supreme Court level, sent him a letter just this week saying, thank you so much for being so open and for your leadership in this, and saying you have my full support. This is something that, you know, she was very proud to acknowledge, and he felt very proud to be able to share that. But this goes, you know, back to the fact that when the president put this tweet out this morning, or the series of tweets, he mentioned that this was kind of a financial burden too for people who don't currently agree with the fact that transgender men and women get their surgeries paid for while under the medical coverage within the United States military's benefits. And so when you see a lot of these different debates going back and forth as far as whether a transgender man or woman should be allowed to serve in the military, that is the argument that has come up in years past, is that they are getting these surgeries, many of them choosing to get these surgeries, and that would be covered under their benefits. So many taxpayers are saying, should that be the responsibility of the taxpayer? And recently, this was actually voted down, that, you know, previously in the Obama administration, they had worked very hard to protect the transgender rights, and the Trump administration tried to make some changes a couple of weeks ago. That was voted down, and we all thought the transgender community had a win there, but apparently the president took it upon himself today to say, no, that's not the case.
And this is, let's go back 2016, around this time when the Obama administration had lifted that ban against transgender men and women to be able to serve in the military. So for a year now, people like your friend have been able to serve openly as a transgender male or female. Now I want to go back to the medical costs. If you're sitting at home wondering, what is the cost of the genital reassignment surgery? And that's what they call it when a man who is a born male with the genitalia of a male is a female inside and is a transgender woman. Say that we're talking about a man born male being a female. When they want to remove the genitalia that makes up a male and become a female, that here in the States costs more than, we're looking north of $100,000. And so this is where the Trump administration looks at that, this is by us dissecting the tweets, looks at that and says, no, let's just ban, not deal with any of those costs. Let's just ban the trans community as a whole, instead of maybe, and this is something we're talking about, why didn't he or the administration say, okay, we'll just take that part out? Because how about if there's a trans person out there, and I know people in my life who are like this, who identify as a trans he or she, but they don't want the reassignment surgery.
Right.
So then what does that mean? They can't serve because they have a benefit that they're not even going to take advantage of?
Right, because at some point it's basically looping everyone under the same umbrella. You can be a trans person in the military. You can say, you know what, I was born technically a woman or a man, but now I identify, or I have always identified as the other sex or gender. And I, am saying this, but I do not want reassignment surgery. So does that mean that if I am already in the military, that I will be kicked out or removed because of this? So that is the question on top of all of these other questions. If you are serving and if you are active military personnel as of right now, will you be removed from the armed forces?
The numbers?
And The Hill was reporting this morning that there are only about 250 transgender active right now, but I know there are some different numbers depending on which source you go to. But Representative Vicky Hartzler said that part of the reason why the medical costs could exceed well over $100 to $130, $30,000 rather, is because not only is this per surgery, but also the lifetime of hormone treatments, additional surgeries to address the high percentage of individuals who experience complications. And this was all brought up a couple of months ago when they were trying to basically restrict funding for the transgender community within the administration. That ended up failing at the time. So now, the Representative Hartzler said that this was a burden and the transgender community couldn't deploy and fight for our nation for up to 200 to 230 days after the surgery.
That's how long it takes to properly recover?
According to her, yes, and her arguments. But then there are many, as you saw the tweets, Kamala Harris of California. We saw a bunch of different people today on the Democratic side and some on the Republican side saying we shouldn't judge you based on your gender identification. It should be more based on, can you serve our country? Elizabeth Warren also speaking out this morning saying something similar to that. So it's definitely causing controversy on both sides of the aisle today.
Yeah, and I think another question is, because again, we're full of questions, we're trying to figure this out just like you guys at home, but one of the things that I first thought when I heard this is, so now are we assuming that there is a cost associated or a max cost associated with you willing to put your life on the line for your country? Because if I'm joining the military and I'm under the impression or the understanding that I potentially would have to serve, go overseas or wherever that may be, there's a war, I will be on the front lines or somewhere involved in that. However, that does not include me putting my life on the line, does not include certain costs that may come on the back end or later on down the line. So I'm willing to die, but I can't spend over this amount because I want this surgery and I'm maxed out. So
it's like having your cake and eating it too. You can have me in the military and use me in the front lines. Okay, that's what you sign up for as a soldier in any of the 5 branches of the military. But you don't want to pay for my surgery should I want it as an option. I guess the other question here is this discrimination? Because that's the other side. The right side this morning is saying this isn't about President Trump not liking or not supporting the trans community. This is about him, the administration, saying, no, we don't want to pay for that $130,000 surgery should you want it. But is that discrimination to you guys?
Well, I think it can be seen as discrimination. There's a tweet going around this morning from 2016 where the president said, and I'm going to read the quote here, "Thank you to the LGBT community. I will fight for you while Hillary brings in more people that will threaten your freedoms and beliefs." And that was June of 2016. I do believe that by branching all of transgender men and women into the category that they all basically are a burden because the medical costs associated with them wanting to transition can certainly be seen as discrimination. However, I do want to bring this up. I know we asked the question, well, why couldn't they just say, maybe we just don't pay for the surgery. Maybe we let them serve but not pay for the surgery. I have a problem with that because that to me is discrimination. That to me is saying you can be here, but we're not going to support X, Y, and Z, which is a part of your life and whom you identify. Yeah, and to say that they can choose which benefits they will and will not cover would be discrimination, in my opinion.
Do they do that in the straight community when you're talking about benefits? Are there lines that cut off to say, okay, you're in the military, we'll pay for this, but we won't pay for that surgery? I would need to do more digging to figure that out. But yes, I understand your point of view, because if he would have thrown out those tweets this morning, we would still be here talking about it to say, you know what, this is discrimination. You want said person to serve in the military and die for this country, yet you don't want to pay for this surgery because it's too much on taxpayers.
Or real quick, should we open up the conversation to say other things should not be paid for as well? Because when
in the straight community,
because certain things can be costly or some things can be considered unnecessary to certain amount of people.
But $130,000.
Well, even if but again, should it be, is it the question of the amount of money, or is it the question of you don't believe in it and you don't think it's necessary and you don't think that this is something that people should have?
Well, and I know a lot of you at home are thinking we're dealing with this literally as we speak with our healthcare system. Right. There could be, under the current, bill that was presented yesterday that did not pass, Republicans had the right to repeal. That was what they were trying to do, right? Repeal Obamacare, but not have a plan in place to replace it. And under that, the CBO said, hey, there would still be 32 million Americans who would lose coverage under just the repeal part, not the replace part. So that in itself is choosing, in some people's eyes, who would be covered for what and under what circumstances. And so it's a broader conversation, and I know some people are saying this is unrelated to healthcare. I think it was President Trump's intentional move to do this today, to distract from the fact that healthcare didn't move through yesterday, and to say, all right, here's what we can do, and I'm going to take it under my own wing and do it.
I'm thinking, as I don't know if Scaramucci, who's the new White House director of communications, I don't know if this is part of this new plan. Yes, distract, right? But why distract with something just as, if not more controversial? Now we're getting celebrities, not that we care about what the celebrities are saying, because I know there are a lot of people, who cares what celebrities, but I'm saying those people make a lot of waves on social media. That's where you're getting a lot of this hate from, is the people who are saying these things about you. We know Chrissy Teigen was banned by President Trump. She's John Legend's wife. She says a lot of mean things, quote unquote mean things, according to him. He banned her. He cares about these sort of things. We get Jesse Tyler Ferguson, Modern Family, redhead. He coming out this morning just really against this. To me, from a communications standpoint, is this good distraction, or is any distraction good distraction?
Well, it definitely shifted the conversation, because this morning before 5:45, everything was about last night, John McCain speaking, coming in off of brain surgery, casting the vote, the decision to repeal and replace being shut down, and now still just talking, no solution, and talking, and then immediately it switched to transgender rights. So I think it.
A lot of his supporters are
that's what I was going to say.
Right behind him.
Okay, so here's the deal. Yesterday, by the Republicans not pushing through a bill to repeal Obamacare, the Republican Party seemed a little broken last night.
Even Republicans going against the Republican
Party.
Party.
They couldn't decide as a unit to move something forward. So there is a majority of Trump supporters out there who are very much in line with taxpayers not having to front the bill for everybody when it comes to Medicaid and Medicare and all the different resources that are out there. And so I think that this speaks to a lot of President Trump's audience and fan base who believes, and I put this on my Facebook page. Scott McCaskill said people should have the freedom to be who they want to be, but their decisions in life should not have to be paid for by the taxpayer. This whole deal has become a huge distraction, is not good for the total health of our country. Evans says this, yes, that is a leader, as in President Trump. Immorality is out. So I think if you are someone who is for President Trump, this speaks to you. If you're someone who's against President Trump, this makes you angry, which maybe he's trying to do intentionally, because his Republican Party last night could not push through something that they have really been working, not just for a few months, for 7 years.
Right.
More than that. With the Obama administration, ever since Obamacare was passed many, many years ago, the Republicans said we have to put a plan to scratch this 7 years ago.
Right.
So I think that it could have been strategic, personally.
Yeah, and
a lot of people chiming in.
A lot of people are chiming
in. Debbie Willard, Donna Marie on the same page. How is that discrimination? It's not discrimination. Get over it. Then you have Anise Bass Life Bank saying, yes, discrimination. Debbie, wow, people, how do you see this as discrimination? Oh, wait, it's always discrimination if you don't like it. So arguing the fact that there are always two, if not three, four sides of every argument. If you don't agree with something, then you want to put a word with a negative connotation around it. I get that. I get that, but
okay, I pulled up the definition of discrimination, just so we are clear and everyone at home is clear. The unjust or prejudicial treatment of different categories of people or things, especially on the grounds of race, age, or sex. That is the definition of discrimination. So by definition, maybe by personal preference, you could see it either way. By definition, you could see it one way, but that is the official definition of discrimination.
Which I think, depending on what side of the aisle you're on, it can or cannot be discrimination. And I think that personally, if, in my opinion, if they were going to, if the administration was going to allow a transgender person to serve in the military but not to cover certain surgeries, they would be discriminating toward their sex, I think. That is how I would perceive that. So by the president saying we're going to do away with it altogether, maybe saved that argument, but then started a different argument, right?
And this may be a silly question, but if we're talking about the man who has all the power in this free world, is the cost of a genital reconstruction surgery too high right now? Is it too high, and can he change that? Because if you're talking $130,000 surgery, this has been a debate for a very long time in the trans community. They feel discriminated against because here is something that they did not ask for when they were born. When someone's born and they have the parts of a female, but they are a male, why do we have to pay $130,000 for this reconsignment surgery, or the rest of my life I have to go around feeling a certain way, feeling like I'm being discriminated against? I have no option. There's so many people in the trans community who feel shunned, the parents kick them out on the streets because they're abnormal according to society. They don't have the means and the money to pay for this. So does he and the administration have any control over the bills? I don't know.
Well, I think but then that's a bigger conversation, because you're looking at government, but then you're looking at doctors and staff who are paid not by the government. So you're having a surgery performed and supported by people who have nothing to do with the president. So
and when it comes to taxpayer money and the military benefits, I think it becomes a different story. I'm seeing Debbie who says, why should insurances pay for an elective surgery? That's one way to look at it.
It is one way, and I get that, because if you're not trans, if you don't know anybody who has been born into the world and literally was born into the wrong body, look at someone like Caitlyn Jenner. You can hate Caitlyn Jenner. She is a Republican, which goes against a lot of what the trans community goes for, right? Most liberal, you want to be accepted in this world, not that that's only what liberal means, but she has a Republican agenda, yet is part of the trans community. But if you watch any of the interviews with her, she was born a male. It was Bruce Jenner, one of the greatest athletes, an Olympic athlete of our time. But his whole life, he felt like a woman. So years later, his set age, he became a she. This was not something that they control. And so when you say it's an elected surgery, it is. But it's also to match your identity.
And should we? But then my question again: should we open up all other elective surgeries or elective procedures, because braces are covered by your insurance?
That's elected. You can go around with janky teeth all you want.
Does this mean everything is on the table?
That's
everything that you choose to have that you don't necessarily need will be under review? Because I think then because if you're putting that on one thing, then it's open season. So does that mean we're open season for everything?
When it comes to the cost, back to that, $130,000 plus potentially, I don't think that that's negotiable. I think that, surgery in this country costs a lot of money, and there are a lot of doctors who will tell you we never get paid because of so many people on the welfare system who choose not to pay their medical bills, which is another argument. The anesthesiologist, the tools, the time in the hospital, the IVs, the doctor's visits, the bills, it all adds up. And so those people who are performing these surgeries need to get paid. So if that's the cost, and maybe it's really high, but if that's the cost, that's the cost. So I don't think that if the president's not willing to let these people serve, that he would be willing to let them have a cheaper surgery.
Right, and which is why a lot of the trans community elects to go overseas, places like Bangkok, to get the surgery for at a much lower rate. We're talking $10,000. And with that, you go from $130,000 to $10,000. There's other issues that come with that, because when you get anything for a reduced cost, right, well, you get what you pay for. So interesting morning, because there are so many sides to this. Cornelia, though, going back to that point about, do we have to look at benefits as a whole and say, okay, braces, what other things are paid for that are choices? You don't have to have braces. It's a great point. You don't have to have braces to make your face look right. But it's a choice. But it's covered.
clearly you guys have a lot of opinions on this. I'm seeing so much commenting, and Jamie says it takes too much time away to recover, which is one of the arguments that was made by the Republican.
And I didn't realize that.
Representative,
210
yes,
to
when that
230
Republican
days?
representative mentioned that in a part of that article this morning, and I can come back to that. What this Republican representative said is that it would take about 210 to 220 roughly days to be able to recover, 210 to 238, and that equals 1.4 million manpower days where the transgender personnel cannot deploy and fight our nation's wars.
And and there could be people saying that, yes, are certain members of the trans community taking advantage and only enlisting into the military to get this paid for? Or is that beating the system, cheating the system, or are they, like Cornelia said earlier, you can't just sign up for the military.
Yeah.
And you have to pass tests. You have to qualify.
Just because a rule was put in place to say we're no longer going to discriminate a certain group of people doesn't mean that you're no longer discriminating against certain groups of people. Because yes, you can write it and say, yes, come on in, we're free, open for everybody. But again, we've seen in history has shown just because it's on paper doesn't necessarily mean that you can still get in. So.
If you're all looking for more on this, because I know we have a couple other topics, I am going to share, and I've already shared it once earlier this month, but I'm going to share again, my transgender friend who transitioned. I knew him in high school as a female, and he transitioned and made the move to being a man within the last couple of years openly. And he was interviewed by the Nevada National Guard, and there was a long article written about him and why he felt like now was the time, and the people who were supportive and the people who weren't. So I'll repost that if you guys are looking for more information on that. But again, the first openly transgender male in the Nevada National Guard now does have the support of people at the highest level. It's just that it's on the Democratic side is where that letter came from. But again, this is going to be a topic that we don't know yet what's going to happen to the people currently serving. So I've reached out to him if he can give us a comment, because I think that would be a great perspective, and I'll share that if I get it.
One of the big advocacy groups for the LGBTQ community, T being transgender, it's GLAAD. They're putting out a bunch of facts, wanting real Donald Trump, his name on Twitter, to educate himself on the transgender community, and wanting to educate all of us, because we want to talk about trans, we want to talk about the community as a whole. And this is just really quick before we get into our next subject. Something that really struck a chord with me last week was when Jennifer Lopez posted recently about her niece, nephew, and people are like, well, what is he, what is she, looks one way, identifies as another. But she spoke volumes by tweeting out something by using the proper pronouns and not the preferred pronouns. And this is something I had to do some research on, because how do you use the proper pronouns for someone like a Bruce Jenner, now Caitlyn Jenner? Well, you have to educate yourself, and this is something, and Cornelia talks about this all the time too, when you're talking about certain cultures that you're not of or you're not familiar with. Educate yourself so that you're not out here making assumptions. But Jennifer Lopez put it out, use the pronouns they and them instead of he or she when talking about her niece or nephew, because that's what makes that person comfortable. That's how they identify. And so I think going to the idea of education, advocacy groups like this are needed on days like today, because we're out here saying all these different things when we need to understand the transgender community first. And then we can dive in and start speaking about all of that. So that's my take. Continue the education, research, and learn. Okay, we have about 6 minutes left in this entire conversation, so let's transition